Meniam is a story written by Alison Henderson. The purpose of the short story is to show how the citizens of the city prioritize the welfare of the masses over the welfare of the individual. Despite their bad conscience, they prioritize themselves and the city. The first point I'd like to present is irony, in that the welfare of the city is dependent on the misery of this one child, which is seen quite well in when the narrator says, "But they all understand that their happiness, the beauty of their city, the tenderness of their friendship, the health of their children, the wisdom of their scholars, the skill of their makers, the abundance of their harvest, and the kindly weathers of their skies, depend wholly on this child's abominable misery." This furthers the dystopic feel by at first making the city seem utopic and then revealing that isn't the case, which is a common tool when making a dystopia. It was seen in Animal Farm as well, when this new society, after having kicked out the humans, was perfect for the animals and they had free will, but in the long run it turns out that the pigs are just manipulating them the whole time. Yes. Secondly, it uses quite a lot of foreshadowing, especially in the beginning of the story, where the city is portrayed very beautiful and in an ideal way, which makes you doubt just how good the city is. A good example of this is on the first page on the second half, when the narrator says, "They were not simple folk, you see, though they were happy, but we do not say the words of cheer much any more. All smiles have become archaic." It makes the reader more curious as to what this revelation that we know is going to come is going to be, and how it's going to impact this city and how we see it. What's the dystopic feel of this city? Because so far we've only seen just how amazing it is and how the people are partying around the city and having a good time. It seems difficult to imagine this city being anything but perfect. But what's going to ruin it? We see these lines and we see just how it's too good to be true, and we wonder, what's it going to be? What's going to ruin this? Yes. And next we have the narrator, which is a very peculiar kind of narrator. It seems both objective and omniscient at the same time. Some examples of this is when the narrator says, "I do not know the rules and laws of their society, but I suspect that they were singularly few." And it could be a boy or a girl when referring to the child. These two quotes seem to make the narrator feel foreign almost. He doesn't really know the ways of this city. He doesn't have all the details. There are things he doesn't know. For example, the laws of their society, or the gender of this very, very important individual. Though on the other hand, he knows that in the next example, it looks about 6, but it's nearly 10. Something that is above just looks. He knows around which age this child is, though he doesn't know if it's a boy or a girl, which implies that he's not actually seen it. But then how would he know the age? And much more, how would he know that it's not the age that it looks like. It makes it seem like it's a person that's been to this city, but isn't really part of the society, though still knowing how people think in this area. Next up is a juxtaposition, which is used quite clearly in the way the city's beauty is put next to the child's suffering. A very good example of this is when we're first introduced to this child, and the narrator says, and I quote, "In a basement under one of the beautiful public buildings of Meniam, or perhaps in the cellar of one of its spacious private homes, there's a room." This creates a clear contrast between the kid and the rest of the city, which emphasizes just how terrible the conditions are for the kid, but also the effect that it has on the that it has on the city, I mean. And it really becomes quite clear just how terrible the conditions are for this kid when you put it next to the spectacle of the city on top, and how beautiful it is and how happy the people are. And then you look just beneath the streets, and there's a cellar with a child sitting in its own excrements, eating just the bare minimal for survival, and only sees people when it's fed or when it's put on show for those of the citizens that have yet to see it. And still, on the other hand, you have the effect that it has. The people know that it could be anyone sitting in this hole, but they're glad it's not them, and they know that there's really nothing they can do, because the entire city's welfare is dependent on this child. And that's about what I have.